Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our Telemedia vodcast. My name's Jarvis Todd. I'm the publisher of Telemedia Magazine and Telemedia News, and the editor. My old friend Paul Skeldon is the wordsmith for said publications. We're going to spend the next sort of 10-15 minutes running through what we discovered from our recent trip to World Telemedia Marbella, which occurred on the 5th and the 7th of October, and we are recording on the 9th of October. So this is going to be very much hot off the press. If you weren't able to attend, or if you were able to attend, but you were too darn busy in your meetings, and this is going to be really useful, because we're going to just pick out, or Paul is going to pick out some of the salient points from what I thought was an excellent conference session, extremely well attended. And I got the feeling, Paul, that whilst Telemedia Marbella has been long established as a major networking event, deal making opportunity. Lots and lots of people focus very much on meetings and catching up with customers and meeting new clients, etc. With the conference being perhaps not the most important thing. What really struck me though was that we really saw significant numbers of people in pretty much every session, right the way through the 2 days of the show, which suggests to me that not only is the industry information hungry, but it also realizes that the industry is moving forward at pace. And
Mm.
boy, oh boy, it seems to me there's a lot to learn.
Absolutely, yeah, it was extremely well attended. I mean, the conference sessions always have a core of people I think that are keen to learn, but this time, uh, every session had sort of was pretty much full, and that's obviously a great thing, and it did sort of show that I think the conference obviously covering the things that people are interested in, but the interaction from the people in the audience was great. They weren't just sitting there taking notes. There was a lot of questions. There was a lot of discussion. Some people making some really good points. It's sort of in addition to what the speakers and presenters had said. So yeah, it was a really interactive and interesting sort of almost kind of audience driven conference. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it was also an excellent opportunity for us to reveal the talents of our new head of strategy, Antar Robertson, and you and she tag teamed brilliantly, I thought, over the 2 days. And it's a shame we haven't got Ansel on with us because but she's obviously en route to her home country in South Africa. But no doubt we'll hear from her a bit later, and presumably you'll be able to reference some of the interesting things that she came up with. Shall we start off by talking content? There was a number of sessions focusing on content. This, as we know, is a moving target. Not only do tastes change, but they change in different countries. Cultural factors come into it, payment cost factors come into it, the economics of it, and trends, as we say, across the board from your Gen Zs to the old people at the end of the line like you and
Mm.
I. So there was a big session, content and entertainment trends, featuring CFM, Seriously Fresh, Perpetuum, and Palo. I think you hosted that one, didn't you? Or you were no, you were an audience member for that.
No, I was in the audience watching that one.
Yeah.
That was chaired by Ansel. But yeah, I mean, I think sort of across that session that was focused on content, what sort of really came out was this fact that they all said it's extremely competitive now, the market for content. It's no good really just having sort of a load of like sort of second rate stuff and people will join the DCB flow, pay and watch it. It now has to be sort of really good, high quality content, and they're all chasing content from big brands. National Basketball Association, NBA in the US is particularly popular. That's popular sort of worldwide. Content from places like Disney and particularly sort of Marvel franchises, all the big games brands, all the big football, soccer for those that aren't English brands. Everyone wants this kind of content or content around those sort of markets. So particularly with sports, there's a big sort of play for because they can't have the broadcasting rights are so expensive. They go to the really big sort of platforms, but for sort of telemedia content stuff and snackable stuff, they want all that behind the scenes, all that 360 analysis sort of side of things. So there's this huge competition for really, really high quality content, and the same people chasing the same brands essentially. Unless you're a niche player where you have to start thinking much more cleverly about what it is you do. and obviously sort of Perpetuum have a lot of deals with people like Disney and with NBA and all that sort of thing around their games, and that's great. But for the sort of more niche players, they have to sort of be much more agile and come up with some interesting new things. And this is where Julia from, excuse me, Seriously Fresh Media has sort of posited this sort of thing that's doing really well currently are these micro dramas.
We talked about that
We talked about it before,
process.
but there's some excellent statistics, and they're all on the sort of website and the various sort of news stories and features we've done about micro dramas. But they're basically sort of very short, sort of 30-second sort of episodes about, that have a story arc, and they're really compelling, and they have a cliffhanger at the end of each one, and you want to watch the sort of next one and keep going. So they're really sticky and they really drive engagement. And I mean, we'll come to marketing and traffic generation sort of shortly, but these micro dramas are sort of self-marketing. Because the sort of business model is you have sort of, show 10 of them for free. People then pay because they want to see what happens. So you can use the sort of content itself to market itself and drive then subscriptions and all the rest of it. So it's thinking of things like that and working in new ways and using the content in new ways that it was really the sort of key theme I felt from the sort of content sessions was that one, it's fiercely competitive. Two, the quality needs to be super high and it needs to be super good stuff. Whether it's short form, long form, whatever that content is, it has to be really good. Consumers are really discerning. There's so much stuff out there; they're not going to watch any old rubbish.
Mm,
So you have to compete. If you can't afford the big brand stuff, there are all these other ways of doing it. So that I thought was a particularly interesting sort of theme that came out of the content side of it.
mm, mm. And there was also some really interesting discussions about kind of various negotiations and relationships between the various stakeholders in the value chain, and how, um, given the higher costs of, let's say, DCB, versus an operator that, or a merchant that might want to be putting out high end content, which again has a higher cost for them. And I think
Mm,
Julia made the case at the end that it's sort of almost like, a bit of a sort of equation and a conundrum to try and get all those pieces
yeah,
fitting together, and everyone having to, um, understand that their position in the value chain and the cost that they want to take out of that can mean, or can be the difference between
yeah,
success and failure, or not even getting a service off the ground in the first place, which I guess also means that, um, more important than ever to consider the range of different payment mechanisms that are out there. Not least because obviously, the more payment solutions you offer, the better conversion rate you're going to have when you finally get a customer that wants to buy stuff from you. But also the variety of payment mechanisms come at a variety of different price points, right?
excuse me. Yes, sorry, I picked up a bit of a cold while at the show. Um, yes, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the sort of point you sort of made sort of before that about the fact that sort of you've got to have a really well structured business model to make sure that it's profitable because of all the sort of little amounts that everybody in the value chain needs to take. Increasingly as well, that's got to be part of an overall sort of business model and pitch that's pitched to operators or service providers. It's no longer a matter of going, right, we've got a load of content, we're going to get a load of traffic from Google, it'll be great. It's got to be a very sort of well pitched, risk assessed, and all very much sort of clearly marked out where the traffic's coming from, how much of that traffic may or may not be fraudulent, statistically, how much money is going to be sort of made from it, what the payment mechanisms are, what the cut of each payment mechanism for the payment provider is going to be, and all that has to be really sort of carefully worked out, codified, and proposed as a business plan. And
And of
again,
course, your payment terms.
and the payment terms and all of those things. And of course, they'll be very different, the payment terms, particularly depending on what payment mechanism you use. So it's suddenly become a much more structured and serious business. It's very competitive. The quality of content that's needed has to be really high. It has to be inventive and sophisticated, and it has to have a really good business case and business model all worked out in advance and presented. It's become quite a sort of I want to say difficult, but it's more of a challenging thing to do than it ever has been, but much more rewarding because the volume of users is much higher than it ever was.
Yeah, I got that. I mean, in general, the tone and the feeling in terms of um, optimism for the future of
Mm.
telemedia and the sale of digital content, which is obviously the bedrock of what we do. There's, as you say, I mean, I think that the business is getting it is to be successful. You need to be professional and you need to understand the complexities of how to put the deal together to make it
Yeah.
work. But as you say, yes, the prize at the end, and considering the trends that we're seeing, if we look forward to 26, 27, the prizes if you get it right can be quite profitable.
Yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
such prizes.
hugely so. Yeah.
Hugely profitable. Okay, so then we moved on and we talked about um, driving content sales and payments using messaging. And we touched on messaging.
Mm.
We'll probably do a little bit more of this in Barcelona when we welcome Mobile Squared to the city to sit alongside us for 8.1. But messaging was definitely mentioned and quite rightly so, I thought.
Yes, well, I stepped in and did a presentation about messaging because it is a traffic generator potentially. Um, Obviously, SMS has always been a billing channel, premium SMS, still very popular in a lot of markets, still very widely used. But using sort of messaging, SMS, RCS, WhatsApp, Telegram, all those sorts of things. It's become a kind of marketing channel in the sort of non-telemedia world. You see it all the time. It is a way of interacting. It's not quite the same as sending adverts to people. It's a way of interacting. Um, and it has potential in the sort of VAS industry because especially rich messaging, you can really get sort of that kind of engagement. You can show people what are going to get and make it clickable and billable and drive people to it. It's probably not going to sort of surpass Google or social media, but it's definitely a channel worth considering,
Mm,
particularly when people have reached out to a brand wanting something. It's a nice way of making that sort of repeat interaction something that adds value and also can lead to sales. So yeah, it's nascent in the telemedia sector, but it is something that is quite important. And
yeah.
as some of the other things we're going to cover sort of later on around traffic generation, it might have more significance than perhaps people maybe give it credit for currently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, just to finish up on messaging, I mean, I spoke to a number of messaging providers that were in the exhibition. One of the main ones being Horizon, and
Mm,
I had a fascinating conversation with Fabrizio about the whole messaging landscape, the different, again, the complexities of how different demographics use different messaging platforms,
mm,
and and how those messaging platforms can do different things. And again, I think that. There's a range of opportunities, both from a marketing, but also from a commerce point of view, and as you said, from a kind of conversational perspective, of course. And once you've acquired those
mm,
customers, so I definitely think that messaging has to be in the mix there somewhere. But let's perhaps get back to something that we would obviously, and you touched on earlier, that is probably core and fundamental, and that's how do we get those customers? And of course, for the last couple of years, that has been absolutely dominated by Google, and quite rightly the Mesh Ads Google session, which has become a bit of a regular update for anyone that's come to telemedia shows in the past. Always very well attended. Everyone wants to hear what Google have got to say. Certainly, the key to success means that you need to be playing by Google's rules, I think, and understanding
mm,
how to get the best out of them is essential. So there was that session, and then but we also then looked at, of course, some of the whole range of other social media platforms that are coming into play now, namely, TikTok, Telegram, all those things that you and I are definitely not on and are not really meant for us. But of course, for the telemedia industry, for anyone that's looking to successfully onboard customers, particularly from that new generation who are is where the market growth's coming from,
mm.
you need to be across all of that now, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is still currently dominated by Google. Um, as you're saying, Google were there, sort of somewhat enforced this time actually at the show, which is great. And they play a fundamental role in sort of traffic generation for sort of telemedia services. There was a sort of feeling I got that it came up quite a few times in different sessions about the cost per click from Google is going up, and that's starting to sort of affect the economics of how you use Google to drive traffic to MVAS because the margins are quite low already. Any increased cost is problematic. Equally, there's some problems with in a lot of countries, the MNOs have a redirect when people come into a particular service. It's totally legitimate. It usually goes to sort of a registration page or some sort of age verification or something legit. But Google's AI sees this redirect as being potentially sort of, a fraud, like sort of it thinks that the traffic's being hijacked and sent somewhere else. So a lot of services are inadvertently being shut down as a result. So there was quite a lot of not bad feeling, but a lot of like, oh God, this was working really well. Now, like
Frustration.
we need to sort out these issues. Though to be fair to Google, they did say they're very well aware of this MNO redirect problem and are working on it and tackling it. And it pops up here and there. It's a bit like whack-a-mole. They have to then just sort of sort it out as it happens. So
Mm.
that's being taken care of. The cost per click side of it, obviously, they're getting more businesses coming through Google. Of course, they're going to try and make more money out of that. But that was particularly interesting. That sort of for the past few years, Google, everybody loves it and loves the traffic coming from Google. This year, it's like we still love Google, love all the traffic, but it's getting a bit pricey. So no one really had an alternative. So I think it's still going to be a big driver of traffic, but there was some sort of little bit of dissent in the ranks about the costs can be particularly difficult, particularly in the really sort of tight margin parts of the business and in particular parts of the world, which is
So
another
did
reason
you?
why people are looking at messaging.
Yeah. I mean, did you sense that there was a sort of renewed enthusiasm for the likes of TikTok and Telegram and
Oh,
Facebook?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Telegram in particular is popular in certain regions, particularly those kind of Central Asian sort of regions. Um, and social media generally, I mean, sort of Facebook has driven an awful lot of traffic, not as much as Google, but it's up there. And increasingly Instagram and those sorts of services are. TikTok's the really interesting one at the moment because for the sort of younger end of the market, they are all on TikTok, and they all use that TikTok model of scrolling and video and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And so that has huge potential for driving traffic. It's just quite difficult to make it work with this because to have something where you're using it to market your service, you have to have really compelling content that's going to make people pause long enough to read the call to action. You've then also got to have it set up that if they do want to pursue it, they've got to click and be taken out of the platform
Right.
to wherever you want them to go. So that can be tricky. The same thing applies to YouTube, which is, as we know, part of Google. More people are looking at YouTube as a traffic generator as well because it's a very similar look and feel to TikTok. It has that ability more easily to click on them and to be taken out of platform to then engage with the service. But the problem with both TikTok and YouTube is you've got to have excellent, compelling short form content for the marketing to drive people to actually pause long enough to click. And that's quite expensive to do because you have to keep making more and more of it because it has to be fresh, it has to be new, it has to be really good, and it has to be sort of fed into the feed every 3 4 days a week at most. It needs to be refreshed, and so it's an excellent traffic generator potentially, but it's quite expensive,
Yeah.
time consuming to do, even with AI making all that content for you.
Although, and I can't remember who it was on day two from Sound Media. I think it might have actually been in one of the country sessions.
Hmm.
The point was made. I think they were asking about the different responses that you can expect from sort of traditional static advertising
Hmm.
and video. And I think the point was made by one that the cost of video relative is obviously becoming a lot cheaper, relative to static because of the use of some of these AI tools.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was actually Mahmood from Sam, and I think he was actually in the audience and made this point. But yeah, AI can really help you generate that volume of content and it's high quality. I think you still need to have the idea of for something
Yeah,
that's going to be, the nub of an idea that you get
sure,
AI to then make. But yeah, the cost is coming down and down and down, and it's going to be an essential that you won't be able to market these services without using short form video in TikTok and YouTube and anywhere else. So it has to happen. It's just sort of how do you do that? And who pays for that marketing? Like, where in the value chain does that money come from to market these services?
sure, sure. Well, I think just yesterday we had the latest AI video launched from the guys at ChatGPT, didn't we?
Yes.
And I would suspect that this is going to be something that we will follow with great interest in 2026. I certainly think that it suggests that in terms of marketing, the telemedia industry is in a position to really up its game. You're quite right. There's no point having the tools, but without the great ideas. But it's becoming very sophisticated and almost closer and closer to, I don't know, some of the most sophisticated ads that
Mm.
you've seen we used to see on some traditional television. But and that's kind of what you've got to do to attract the eyeballs and get the customers interested. So yeah, I feel like it's going to become a more and more important side of the event. And I would throw out a challenge and say, let's get TikTok speaking
Yeah.
in Dubai, because I think it'd be very interesting to hear exactly what their views are on this and how merchants and advertisers can get the best out of that platform. Well, where else should we go? Should we go to day two, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some key themes around payments, which I think were in day one, and then day two we focus more on the sort of individual regions. But it might be worth quickly talking about payments before we look at the sort of regional side of things, because there was
Right.
a big theme that came out of the payment side of it, and then was sort of echoed throughout the rest of the conference. Really was this huge interest now in well, I use it in inverted commas, credit cards, but so card payments, and it's all driven by more and more people all over the world using Google Pay and Apple Pay and other wallets, and suddenly all these sort of people in the telemedia value chain and people who want to sort of sell content are looking really seriously at how to integrate card payments like that into their flows, and that sort of dominated. And I was surprised to some extent that it's not in every market. It's in the MENA region in every market. It's in Africa in every market. It's in the European markets. It's obviously in LATAM and all the other places that we didn't sort of cover so much. But in the main areas we looked at in this particular event, they're all really wanting to know about wallets. And the Solaris sponsored session about payments was extremely well attended. And a lot of people furiously scribbling down notes. And I think sort of, they want to know the economics of it, the complexity of it, and how to actually do it. How do you actually go from being a sort of, been doing DCB for 30 years? How do I work wallets into that? How do I make this work? And that there's a lot of talk, a lot of buzz around that.
Well, we've seen Solaris leading the line in this area now for probably the best part of 18 months. And
Mm.
you're quite right. When I've chatted to the guys down there, they feel like they've really found an exciting new home for their global expansion plans
Yeah.
and the telemedia industry, certainly, as you say, and we've said it many times before, offering a variety of payment solutions is certainly key.
Mm.
Integrating those payment solutions can be difficult, but presumably worthwhile. And especially when we talked about the economics, once you've got these solutions working, some of them are going to offer you much better margins.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Key really is
definitely.
balancing up all the benefits of DCB and the sort of seamless, instantaneous ability to be able to use DCB versus what might be, excuse me, I've got it now. These are being slightly more complicated with other alternatives. I'm going to stop talking for a minute. Why don't you lead us into some of the
Like so,
international,
for anyone who
some
remembers
of
the
the
Fast
international
Show,
meet?
if anyone remembers the Fast Show, it's like Bob Fleming.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's yeah. It is a potentially really good way of billing for stuff because the sort of payouts are much better. The payment sort of the speed of getting the money is quicker, but you are dealing with massive big banks, and so it can be that to some degree, the telemedia sort of services are sort of minnows compared to the sort of massive companies that these credit card companies deal with. You can maybe get lost a bit in the sort of bureaucracy of trying to sort of find the right person to talk to and all that. So it can be difficult. You need to really work with a payment orchestration company to who can do all that for you in all the regions with all the different terms and things. But yeah, I think we're not going to see the end of DCB because it's such a sort of simple and beautiful payment flow, and we'll come to sort of some of the other reasons around that shortly. But this move to cards is becoming, it's a big part of it now, and it's young people in MENA or sub-Saharan Africa who are also wanting to do this. It's not just sort of a load of middle-aged men in Europe. It's really is where the market's going, and yeah, it's that's going to be an interesting thing I think in the events we do in 2026. We're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, should we now let's now talk about regions. Obviously,
Yeah.
anyone that's watched any of our vodcasts over the last 12 months will know that we also have an event, a very successful event now in Dubai, which was specifically set up to really start looking at the MENA market and offering those regional players an opportunity to have a telemedia event in their backyard. And the next event is coming up 27th, 26th, 27th, 28th of April 2026. A lot of 20s in there. And that is already looking like a humdinger. It's going to be, I think, probably even bigger than Marbella. So it would have been remiss of us not to look at the MENA market. I suppose, without going, I mean, obviously it's an exciting region. I mean, we've known that for quite a long time. It's gone beyond developing, it's gone beyond emerging, but there's still a way to go. There's still lots of opportunities. There's still lots of growth, I think. Clearly there are many regional specific issues that anybody looking at the at that or sort of country specific issues that anyone is looking at that area needs to be aware of. We've mentioned before, it feels as though you've got a landscape where you've got a sort of mobile operator level that's perhaps certainly more kind of proactive towards digital content services, and specifically the using or working with the telemedia industry to generate new revenue streams, offer their subscribers better services, and basically make more profits. So what would you say was the overall kind of what were the takeaways from the guys that were talking about
From
MENA
MENA,
and moving into Africa?
yeah, I mean, as you sort of say in Dubai, we sort of cover this in way more detail. But the sort of standout things about the discussions in Marbella around the MENA region is that it's evolving and evolving really quickly. But it's a really strong, well-established market now. If you look at it as a whole, it's very well regulated, largely, and fraud is as under control as it can be in any of these markets. A lot has been done to sort of make it a strong and safe market. And in many ways, you can sort of see some of the trends that we've been discussing are really prevalent in MENA. It's almost sort of a leader in some ways of how this is sort of developing at the moment. And as you rightly say, the MNOs there are more open to these kind of services. I think because they see the potential of it. They are the sort of content and service providers for the sort of mass audience, and so it is extremely popular and makes a lot of money, and it's going to keep growing. A lot of the markets are very well established. UAE, and Saudi, all those sorts of markets are very well established, but there are still some up and coming ones, and the ones that were mentioned several times that are quite interesting are Iraq is particularly strong and has got some real potential and has really come a long way in terms of regulation and sort of payments and all that sort of side of it is doing well. Jordan, small, but again, quite a keen, large sort of proportion of the sort of population or audience for this. And Palestine,
Yeah.
which has seen surprising, it's seen sort of quite strong, considerable growth across 2025, which, given the sort of political situation in that particular part of MENA, is quite, quite sort of heartwarming, really. Like, people want these services. It can still grow. It's not a market to sort of shy away from just because, there are sort of other troubles there. It's got a lot of potential. Libya was also mentioned a few times. Libya was mentioned quite a few times at our last Dubai event. And it's one of those markets that sort of everybody looks at it and says that's got really huge potential, but we're a bit worried about sort of, how we do business there, particularly how we get the money out
The
and that
money
kind
out,
of thing.
yeah.
But as the point was made by Christian from MT2 in the MENA panel, the if you work with the right people there, that's not a problem. You just need to have local partners, and this is something that really came across about MENA and Africa is you've got to work with local partners to localize. Your what is a good idea and works in all the markets. You still have to localize it and work with local partners to sort of deliver it and to oil the wheels between you and the MNOs and the payment companies and those sorts of things. So yeah, so they're all pretty open, good markets if you find the right partners.
And that same point was made by David Lotvey from the CEO of Avena in the
Yeah.
the next session when they were talking about Africa and how business is so much easier, how fraud is so much lighter or reduced, and how compliance is so much easier to implement when you're dealing with a local partner that understands the
Mm,
local audience that you are marketing your services to. Sounds kind of obvious, I suppose. And we've been saying it for many years, but I suppose other bigger players might think, well, we don't need to carve up the pie anymore. We'll just steam in, set up an office,
mm,
go out for dinner, speak to a couple of locals, and away we go. And it is probably not the right way to do it. I mean, I think that conversation was expanded, wasn't it, when we talked about Africa? And I think,
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, whilst there are similarities, those points that you just raised are probably even more pertinent when it comes to Africa. And of course, when you're talking about, and this was something that was also mentioned. Um, when you're talking about local a country within a region in Africa, those countries could have up to 17, 18 languages. Um, so whilst regionalization and localization is really important,
Mm,
you get to somewhere like Africa, and there are really significant issues. And then, of course, there were other issues with that in that what languages do you then communicate in if you have a problem or something like that. So
yeah.
um, again, I suppose it's a little bit like the content puzzle, isn't it? This is what the telemedia industry does so well. It's just kind of work out how everything fits together to get to hit that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Um, and it would be foolish to think that um, to get the rewards that it's going to be necessarily easy. But there are solutions, and I suppose in some ways that's why we've seen such a sort of significant kind of cultural change within the telemedia industry.
Mm,
Because if you go back to when we first started, barriers were pretty low. You could buy an ad in a magazine and stick a telephone number on it, and away you go. And that, of course, created an enormous amount of problems,
mm.
and particularly in the European market. So, the development of the industry and the complexities of the industry, I also think, probably work in its favor in that we're looking at a business and an industry now that it looks very, very, very different to what it did in the late 1990s.
Absolutely. I mean, I think sort of going back to where we started with this, with the content in this podcast, we're talking, the brands people want and are working with are Disney and Marvel and NBA and Serie A and the Premier League and all those sorts of things. I mean, that would have been inconceivable sort of 20 years ago. It just, been lovely, but that just wasn't possible. So that has really changed. What was
Well, I think the only
particularly
brand back in the 90s that was Crazy Frog. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, quite, and even that was sort of had issues, isn't it? The
certainly
ringtones
did.
side of things became quite problematic, but
Certainly did. It
but
certainly
those
did.
days are behind us. But what was interesting about the Africa discussion that James McNabb from Basebone brought up was this about this localization is that you need. to look at the language side of it, definitely. And as you say, some countries themselves within Africa can have many languages. So what languages do you market it in? You have to just test it and try it and market in all the languages. It depends on sort of how big the segments are and who's likely to go for it. But you have to do that level of localization. You have to work with local partners. We don't necessarily have to look at local content. A lot of the content works, especially these big name brand content. Premier League works in many African markets, so you don't have to worry about the localization of the content necessarily. It's more the localization of how you market it, price points, payment terms, payment types, all that kind of thing. That's the sort of level of localization you often need in the African market.
Yeah, no, agreed. Um, there were, I know James also, and a number of people also raised the same point I've mentioned earlier, and was also mentioned in, of course, in Dubai. This whole issue with by Smita, I think, in Dubai, but this whole issue of payment terms is so important. I mean,
Mm.
again, in order to penetrate good markets, you need to take the sort of view that it's a long-term investment rather than a quick win. And I think that sort of mentality in its own right, that kind of mentality in its own right, makes a massive difference. Um, let's talk about the afternoon and how we then move back to our base in Europe, because it was nice to see AIM back in Marbella, and I think the overall message, as one of the sessions suggested, was that the UK market is open for business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, yeah, it was great to see Joanna from AIM was there. The UK has changed how it sort of were premium rate services, the telemedia services, how they're regulated in a really profound way. So we no longer have a specific regulator that just looks after phone pay services. It's now all part of Ofcom, who is the regulator of everything from sort of telecommunications to media to broadcasts, even takes care of the post office. So it now falls under their remit. And what's particularly interesting is their sort of regulatory structure. The regulations they put in place have been done as what's called a statutory instrument. So it's an act of parliament has set out what the regulations are that need to be met. And that means it can't be changed without it going through Parliament again. So this idea, because previously when we had ICSDIS and then who did we have after that? We had Phone Pay Plus, I
Okay,
think.
plus, yeah.
Then we had the PSA, the Phone Pay Services Association. Well, yeah, they had a new code of practice every year. It would arrive, you'd all start working on it to make sure you could meet its demands, knowing full well that in 12 months' time another one would appear that would probably be different.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so there was this constant like you didn't know where you were at with it. And it to some degree did sort of stagnate the market. It didn't really see any development. This new way of doing it with this statutory instrument, it has very clearly defined things you have to do, and you have to do them up front before you can launch your service. But once you've done it, you can just get on and run your business, assuming you don't break any of the rules or generate loads of complaints. Away you go. And this has suddenly made the UK market look a bit more attractive for development because people can start to put out new services and new ideas as long as they do all of this work up front and meet the rules because they know it's not all going to change again, within another year or so. So, so the UK market, yes, is very much open for business. It's really positive. We haven't had a discussion like that about the UK market, I don't think probably ever. So it was really heartening to see, and it attracted quite a lot of interest from the audience. There were a lot of questions for Joanna from AIM, and also from for Victoria from Dynamic Mobile Billing, who have done a lot of work on how to sort of actually make this work in practice, and are helping advise people along with MCP as to how to meet all these regulations and how to do the work up front. Got a lot of questions. A lot of people wanted to know about it. So let's see. Hopefully a lot more business coming into the UK market.
Well, that would be encouraging. I mean, we talked about. I mean, if you go back to the early days again, the UK market, huge potential market. Also, there was a lot of talk around Germany as well. We mentioned that the other
Mm,
day. Slightly different dynamics there, but again, the Germans very well represented in Marbella. Particularly nice to see Mobile Business Engine being one of our main sponsors this year. Um, and I spent quite a lot of time with those guys, and you know they're really going great guns there. Some of the numbers that are being generated out of those markets are fantastic, and so yeah, I think you know it's important. I think part of the sort of overall message is that you know globally telemedia services are going well, and it's definitely not a case of well, you know, the European market's finished and now so let's all go head over to Dubai or down to South Africa or over to Asia. I mean, I think it's part of as you would expect of sort of general sort of buoyancy
mm,
because the market's serving you know what is fundamental to customers whether they're in Sao Paulo or San Jose or
mm,
Singapore. And that is, and it goes back to your point about Palestine. You know, the number one way of serving up media content is your telephone screen, and then that kind of doesn't, you know, is ubiquitous. It doesn't matter really where you are in the world now,
mm.
and that certainly wasn't the case back in the old days before mobile or even the internet. You know, not you don't need a computer, you don't need a television, but everyone, as we all know, has
Fine.
got a mobile phone, and when you start looking at it as being the primary media source, the primary communication tool, then obviously commerce is going to fall in line with that. Just to finish off on a European high, it was nice to see Lily Mobile giving us an insight into what's going on in Greece and the lessons that have been learnt over there. Again, I mean, I'm not sure how big the Greek market is. I would assume probably pretty significant, right?
Yeah, it's a reasonably good sized European market. It's an interesting one because it's predominantly premium rate SMS still. They're trying to push for more DCB. What's interesting there is that largely at the instigation of Lily from Lily Mobile is that she's got all of the competitor telemedia companies to sort of get together with a couple of exceptions who haven't, but mostly like 35 companies that operate in this market in Greece are lobbying the regulator and the network operators in Greece to make this work better, to get DCB rolled out more widely, to make the to make it a market because the potential there is big, and that was one of the sort of overriding themes that came out of the afternoon, or probably that whole day about the sort of regional markets, is that we've reached a stage where, for MNOs, perhaps not so much in MENA, but everywhere else, MNOs, this is a small part of what they do. And most people who work for an MNO probably don't know any of it even exists. But it's potentially a multi-billion dollar industry that it will be much bigger. And I think we've reached a stage now of size, but also confidence is what I felt from the people there, that we need to sort of band together and educate MNOs about like how they really need to get on board with this, not just carrier billing, but just the access to services so that people can run excellent content services that are micro billed, be that through credit card or through carrier billing or PSMS or whatever other way they're going to do it, and sell them this idea because they're missing it. They're missing out and they don't really get it. And that was the big sort of takeaway. And it felt to me that that had come from a place of confidence of all the people in that show, not just in the conference, but throughout it. Like it's a bit of pride. They're standing a
Yeah.
bit taller. This is a significant sort of or entertainment and media segment, and you need to take this seriously, particularly MNOs because they own it, and it's their way of playing in that sort of streaming content consumption world, and they could have a really big role to play. It's like we used to talk about years ago about them becoming sort of banks. That never happened, but they have the opportunity to become entertainment companies.
Mm.
Uh,
Well, it's an interesting place to end because I started by saying it was nice to see you and our new head of strategy, Ansel Robertson, working so brilliantly together. And you know, certainly, I think that our audience and our viewers and our readers and our attendees can look forward to um, certainly a number of operator-driven initiatives. Thanks to Ansel coming on board, because as that is where she, you know her background and one of the areas that we felt would really benefit the services that we offer within World Telemedia Limited, our business. And I'm really looking forward to, and people should be looking forward to, a number of different initiatives within
Mm.
the events, the event schedules that we're going to be putting together in 2026, which will be very much focused on having far more education, interaction, workshops directly with the operator
Yeah.
communities in the various regions that we're serving, with an opportunity for them to be working very closely one to one in that sort of educational format to exactly achieve those kinds of goals and get them on board, get them buying into the opportunities and the potential that the telemedia industry represents for them. And we're going to look forward to facilitating that in 2026. Paul, I think we've probably run out of time. I'm very grateful for you to taking time, particularly with a bad throat, having literally 2 days ago spent all your time speaking at the show and looking after our speakers. Anyone that didn't manage to attend the show, please go to the website. You'll be able to see some video and some pictures and then to show you what you missed. And Paul will also be posting some interviews that he did on site with a number of our speakers, and that should be going live. That should be going live in the next couple of weeks or days. So thank you very much, Paul. Look
Always
forward
a pleasure.
to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we'll have many new things to discuss. But yeah,
All right.
excellent. Well, it was an excellent show. Yeah, best one yet. But
Thanks
here's
very
looking
much,
forward
mate.
very much to the next one.